Hey folks, I'm brownbear. Today I'll be doing a review of the StarCraft II Warchest. This review is broken up into 3 parts, each trying to answer a different question. Number 1, did the developers achieve what they set out to accomplish? In other words, does the final product match the initial vision? Number 2, did the vision make sense with respect to the target audience? This is a more practical question focusing on what was actually built. Did the intended customer get what they were looking for? Last but not least, is this vision worth continuing in the future? To answer the first question, let's look back at this interview from 2016 with Jason Huck, lead game designer on StarCraft II. Warchest is a 2-part system. First, it's a player engagement system. You'll buy into it, you'll get some rewards. These are all cosmetic, there are no power rewards in here. So you'll get like skins, decals, portraits, other cosmetic things. You'll progress through the system and unlock more of these types of things. And at the end, if you finish it, you get these other rewards as well. The other second part of that is that it helps fund esports initiatives. Part of that money will be set aside for tournaments and other esports initiatives and stuff. Mr. Huck's described vision almost perfectly matches what was delivered. The Warchest system delivers cosmetic rewards like skins and emoticons, in return for players racking up games and experience. The system is explicitly tied to completing games, delivering on its engagement intent, and never offers any sort of power rewards. 25% of Warchest proceeds go towards StarCraft esports, the first $200,000 of which go directly to the BlizzCon prize pool. They managed to hit this goal just a few weeks after launch. In summary, the developers delivered on their creative vision. They did what they set out to do. Next, we need to consider how this vision plays out for the target audience. I'd like to start with the skins implementation because I think that's the meatiest portion of the system. The developers took an interesting approach here. On the one hand, the art design is middle of the road and consistent with the game's lore. Special Forces, Forged, and Leviathan feel like the antithesis of a controversial creative direction. On the other hand, it brazenly breaks some of the game's own rules for graphical design. In a 2011 technical talk, Alan Dilling, the lead artist on StarCraft II, cited clarity in 2 of the 4 tenets governing Blizzard's art style: bold shapes and crisp and colorful textures. Despite that, a number of glaring clarity issues have emerged since Warchest's release. I'll put one up on your screen to illustrate. On your left you'll see no skins, and on the right you'll see Warchest skins. Try to count the number of immortals and stalkers respectively. It's a bit tougher with the new skins. It's important to clarify why this happens. One problem is the difference in specular highlights. If you don't know what this is, a specular highlight is a type of lighting effect on a 3-dimensional model. Blizzard has previously cited this as a component of its readability design. They engineer the angles on unit models to make them pop more underneath the game's theoretical light source. Now compare the 2 Stalker skins on your screen. Notice that these are not actually skins, they're entirely different models. It's not that an artist repainted the Stalker, instead a 3D modeler built an entirely new model. That means the 2 units feature slightly different highlights, giving them slightly different readability profiles. This is more noticeable on the Immortal because that unit's model was changed more drastically. The length of the guns was shortened and the head curves upward, giving it a profile more similar to a Stalker. New models also means new changes to the common coloring scheme. Many units in the game feature default coloring to make them more noticeable. This is most obvious with Protoss because their units are explicitly styled either gold or silver, which I think has something to do with the game's story, but I genuinely have no idea. Anyway, almost every Protoss unit has a unique color frame. On your screen, you can see how Oracles and Stalkers always look silver and Immortals always look gold. The new models change this in 2 important ways. 1, changes to the default coloring scheme eliminate long-standing color choices like gold on the Immortal. 2, team colors are represented differently. Notice the different medallions between the 2 Stalkers. These minor issues combine to become something you'd subconsciously notice and probably feel bothered by, especially if you play competitively. Players will get used to it over time, but the most impactful probably deserve a patch. The development team recently fixed the Baneling skin through retexturing, restoring its trademark lime green backside. Personally, I see these as bugs rather than design flaws, but the larger concern is that they got through testing in the first place. The Warchest is StarCraft's first major venture into crowd-funded esports, so presumably you'd think they'd want to get it right. Given the natural skepticism players have for microtransactions and gameplay modifications, I would have thought Warchest would be laser focused on building player trust in preparation for future skin drops. It seems like they mostly tried to do this, then went the other way in a handful of other cases. There's already precedent in the game for how to do this well. A number of existing skins, such as the Aiden Immortal and the Mecha Viking, solve the remodeling problem by exaggerating unit features rather than downplaying them. These models have similar highlight, coloring, and modeling changes as the ones I cited previously, but they don't have readability problems because they are more Immortal-y and more Viking-y than even the original designs. One problem with these issues is that there's no option to disable cosmetic items. In principle, I think the idea of disabling skins is absurd and self-defeating. I did a short Twitter thread on this issue which you can find in the description below. In practice, that position requires a healthy dose of player trust. If players assume cosmetic skins will make the gameplay experience worse, they'll be far less forgiving of things like the aforementioned bugs, and far more likely to reject newer and more experimental skin designs. It feels to me like the team went to great lengths to make this batch of skins inoffensive to a fault, but the handful of obvious issues make it difficult to see that. Warchest rewards tie in directly with playing games, offering some level of player engagement. I really like the idea of this system, so you can imagine my surprise when I didn't find it very compelling. I think there are two problems here. One, Warchest is not aspirational. Progression systems are engaging in part because they compel you to look forward to future rewards. Honestly, I never get that feeling from Warchest. Multiple mouse clicks on an entirely separate screen are required just to see what's coming next. Furthermore, the speed with which tiers unlock makes the whole notion of progression feel meaningless. The type of hardcore player that'll invest heavily into Warchest unlocks a month of rewards in 1 or 2 sittings. A more drawn-out progression system would make the rewards meaningful. In return, they should have eliminated the Warchest time limit. 2. Warchest lacks a sense of, at least I have it. In most games, even when you unlock meaningless crap, it still feels good to have gotten it. Designers create this feeling by regularly showing players all of their stuff, and putting progress bars on the screen to remind them of all the stuff that's coming up next. StarCraft II has never been particularly good about this. The achievement system is a good example, and Warchest continues this trend. I honestly have no idea what I've gotten from Warchest aside from skins and emoticons. The collection's interface seems geared toward power and utility, not conveying a sense of, look at all this stuff that you have. On the plus side, the Warchest successfully supports StarCraft esports. Players have responded very positively to the overall value proposition. Regardless of any problems, there's still a ton of content on offer. The system raised $200,000 for the BlizzCon prize pool within just a couple weeks, and additional proceeds have already increased the prize pool for Shoutcraft Kings. In summary, the Warchest leaves something to be desired on the player engagement side, but it does successfully support StarCraft esports. The original vision didn't place enough emphasis on building player trust. Furthermore, while it delivers the intended rewards, it lacks a meaningful progression system. Next, I'd like to answer a purely subjective question. Is this vision worth continuing in the future? I've wrestled with this question for the entirety of Round 2. The way I see it, there are 2 takeaways from this initial launch. Number 1, remodeling units has a definitive cost that can be expressed quantitatively. Specular highlights, color frames, and similarity in silhouettes to name a few examples. Can we measure these characteristics and automatically verify them before releasing a new batch of skins? Rather than relying on readability complaints, can we instead define the quality bar objectively, using Blizzard's art style tenets as a guidebook? Number 2, rewarding players isn't enough. There needs to be a compelling progression system as well. What happens when aspirational features and progression reminders are built into the overall offering? Do engagement and participation increase? Basically, I think the team should continue experimenting in order to answer the above questions. This initial launch has taught us a ton, but it's also produced more questions than answers, at least for me personally. I do want to make one specific comment on releasing more skins. I think part of the backlash against readability problems comes from the lack of investment players have in the units of other races. A Terran player will never care all that much about Zerg or Protoss skins, simply because they have no stake in the coolness factor of those races. What I'm trying to say is that costs in an RTS game are distributed unevenly. Players tend to evaluate gameplay changes with respect to their own race, not in aggregate. Skins development should consider taking this into account. For instance, I noted previously that Warchest goes out of its way to build a middle-of-the-road, non-controversial set of offerings. But paradoxically, I wonder whether the opposite approach would be better. Emphasize radical and off-the-wall redesigns so that players focus on the cool stuff that they're getting instead of the potential problems in other races. In Control, a professional commentator and streamer, made a similar philosophical point about balance design a few years ago. Here's what he had to say. If all 3 races in the game have really strong, fun, and exciting units, and we can find a balance there, I think we have a better game than taking the units of each race that are performing really well and nerfing them into accordance with the others. StarCraft has to, quote, go big or go home, with this being the third and final iteration of StarCraft that we can rely on for now. Take a risk, be bold. This philosophy makes a lot of sense to me when it comes to skins. Make the immortal more immortally, make the Viking more Viking-y. Focus players' attention on the good in the game rather than trying to avoid annoying them. The safe choice might surprisingly be to go big and be bold. Alrighty, that's everything for today. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I'd love it if you followed me here and on Twitter and Facebook to receive regular content updates. The relevant links are in the description below. All the best, and see you next time.